This is the BBC.
Dear brothers and sisters, all are welcome here at the Confessions podcast, whether saint or sinner.
Hey. Yes, you. Hello and welcome to the Confessions podcast from the BBC and your friends at Radio 2. Was that captivating enough at the beginning?
Yeah, that definitely worked. Yeah, well done.
I was trying a little bit too hard.
Yeah.
So here comes tales of Christmas deceit, debauchery and deception. And everyone is seeking dispensation from Sister Bobby, Brother Matt and you, the good people of the UK. For your listening pleasure this week, we have Jez's confession. I was born on Christmas Day. Crazy Canuck story. I'll bake care of you. It was disgusting. Andrew's tale, songs in the key of strife. Plus another classic confession we've unearthed from our crypt. It's very festive and you have chosen it. First, we start with Leslie's confession, the keyboard, the secret. It was just like a play on words, the key, the secret. That was
The Key, the Secret?
Yes, the song, you know. You've got the key.
You've got the key, you got the secret. Yes, that
By
makes
the
sense.
time we've explained it to you, it's kind of worth calling it something else.
What a great title that is, by the way. I love it.
Okay. Good start, everybody.
Simon Mayo's Confessions podcast. Please be seated.
Dear Simon and the festively forgiving faction, this time of year, I'm burdened with the guilt of Christmas 1985. I feel I can only fulfill festive frivolities and frolics if I confess the sins of Yuletide past. Our house back then was in Exmouth in Devon and was painted bright pink with brown windowsills. We certainly stood out amongst all the other brick and pebble-dashed houses on the street. And to make us stand out even more, my mum had decided to treat herself to one of those fancy musical doorbells, which played up to 10 different tunes, from Jingle Bells...
Wow.
Imagine that when someone comes round. From Jingle Bells to, for example, Green Sleeves. Someone's at the door.
Not Christmassy?
No, I'm just it plays a variety.
Oh, right.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Don't be too fussy. December came round and it was time to decorate the pink and brown house. I can't understand why anyone would want a pink and brown house anyway.
Sounds out.
Sounds fine. Wooden windows, nice and pink.
Oh, right.
Quite right,
Yes,
Bobby.
now
Yeah.
I'm particularly thinking now a pink and brown house, that would be a really lovely thing.
Yeah.
Yes, well done.
In Suffolk, there are lots of pink houses.
Yeah. What are you
with a bit of
thinking?
brown. I don't know what I'm thinking. Anyway, it was time to decorate the pink and brown house, which everybody loves and everybody admires. So the old Christmas tree was brought down from the loft. It was a sorry-looking 6-foot silver tinsel tree, which after all the years had lost most of its tinsel, and was simply a tower of deadly metal spikes, which we lovingly hung baubles on. I'm quite sure this was the same year I electrocuted myself on the Christmas tree lights, having poked my fingers into the bayonet socket. So I'm sure this could partially be responsible for my following behaviour. Can I just say that's one of the many things in this confession that you don't want to try that.
Do not do that.
That would be
No.
utterly ridiculous and stupid. I would have been about 9 at the time and giddy with excitement at the thought of school holidays, Santa's impending visit, filling my face with pigs in blankets, soda stream pop, and apparently the odd stolen dreg of a snowball while sat at the smallest seat on the corner of the dining table. But again, that's
We
just
don't
one of those
condone
things that
No,
is sort
no,
of
no, no.
absolutely...
No.
I woke on Christmas Day and gathered my brother and sisters to open up our presents together. Despite my present not being in the shape of Castle Greyskull, a trumpet or Millennium Falcon, I was nonetheless happy to unwrap a Casio monophonic electric keyboard. I mean, what child doesn't want to rock out to a sassy samba or a racy rumba beat?
Oh, I love this. Yes.
Yeah, look at my present that I've got here. It was a model number PT10, I know because I've still got it, and this fantastic piece of kit had a demo button, 29 keys, 4 preset sounds and 10 auto rhythms. You know, like this.
Sounds like the same one.
It is, exactly. It is.
Oh, right.
I've only got one.
Okay.
It also had a function which allowed you to record your own tunes. All of Christmas Day I spent learning new songs to play, in between selling my bag of fun-sized Mars bars to my siblings from my makeshift shop on the landing. Right, okay, so we've got the picture. Boxing Day came, and inevitably the excitement of the big day began to fade, as we then started welcoming in family members who we hadn't seen since the previous Boxing Day. Boredom soon set in, but I still had my Casio keyboard to play with. I know, I thought to myself, I could learn all of the songs that the doorbell plays and record a different one each day. bedtime soon came around, and restless from the excitement of Christmas and probably a snowball dreg or two, I decided to quietly creep downstairs, skillfully avoiding all the squeaky floorboards, and play one of my recordings just outside the lounge door. Something like this. Who the heck is that at the door at 9:30? Shouts my dad. I heard him get up in a fury and make his way from his seat out of the lounge, then on towards the front door, interrupting the Minder Christmas special.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, this was an era when you couldn't pause the TV. Imagine that.
Imagine.
Different times. I quickly but stealthily darted up the stairs and back into my bed, very pleased that I had fooled everyone into thinking there was someone at the door. Well, that worked well, thought to myself. So the next day, I recorded another tune from the doorbell and again crept downstairs and pressed play. Who's that at the door again? Who keeps doing that every night? Hollers my dad. Again, I swiftly run up the stairs like a Christmas ninja, back into my bed as my dad charged to the door in a rage to find no one there again. I pretended to be asleep as calls from the other bedrooms were heard. Who was it, Dad? Who's coming round? Cried my sisters, followed by, no one, go back to sleep. He's angry.
Yeah.
He's downstairs, you could tell. It was very hard fighting off slumber until my older brother and sisters had fallen asleep, waiting for my parents to sit down with a glass of Taboo or Mirage each night.
Imagine this, everyone.
What was were they like kind of...
two different drinks that were a little alcoholic, from what I remember.
Quite sweet and sugary,
Yeah.
but yes, they tasted of hangovers.
Are they still around?
Well, if they are, I apologise for that, but...
Anyway, that's what they're doing. They've got a glass of Taboo or Mirage, and I was committed. I wasn't intending on stopping this nightly tirade of tuneful terror anytime soon. And this, I have to tell you, Father Simon, went on for several weeks in total. Each night, my dad becoming more enraged at the idiot ringing the doorbell and then seemingly vanishing without trace before he could get to the door. Dad suspected everybody. The vicar, random missionaries, ragamuffins from the bad end of town, and Mr. Crowthorne from number 27, who'd taken a dislike to on account of his perm. Eventually, he had to give up after failing to identify the culprit, and I could see it had actually slightly broken him. So, Father Simon, at this time of year when we are more inclined to forgive, I ask for mercy from my mum and dad, because they don't know about this, for ruining what is usually the best part of Christmas for parents, a peaceful evening, watching Christmas specials, kids in bed, calmly sitting down to relax with a drink after the madness of the holidays and not wanting to hear this. Who's at the door again? Also, after further forgiveness is sought from my dad, who as the man of the house was the one responsible for answering the doorbell so late at night. I feel bad for his constant need to get up and off his chair, especially as he only has one leg, so probably could have done without trying to catch the phantom doorbell botherer. To this day, he's
How did this sneak in at the end?
right at the end.
What?
Punchline at the end.
Yeah.
To this day, he still doesn't
only got
know the
the one
truth,
leg.
and I fear it's haunted him for 30 years.
Right.
Do I have to get up again?
We've only got the one leg.
Anyway, okay. So it's it's going to be a tricky one, I suspect. But let's see how it's breaking out here with the collective here. Lindsay brackets male would like the forgiveness, but let's see how Lindsay's getting on here with Sister Bobby.
A proper stealth-like mission. Well done for carrying it off for so long and him not guessing. I'm surprised, actually, with your dad's intellect and intelligence, that he hadn't worked it out that something extra was going on, because there were actually only 10 tunes in the what's it called? The
Doorbell.
Yeah, the doorbell. That's it, that thing.
Yeah.
So suddenly there became more, and you got this kind of organ. So I'm surprised that your dad didn't suss you. Actually, I love this. Great hijinks, and even though your dad had to get up, everyone needs some exercise over Christmas. So you are absolutely
Well, that's one way of looking at it.
forgiven.
Nigel.
Well, I was
Although you only turned up halfway through.
So I know the story. I heard it in the lift. Basically, I think the fact is a Casio a monophonic electric keyboard. That's pretty impressive for a start. Obviously, the one leg isn't great, but Dad, he didn't like random missionaries, ragamuffins from the bad end of town, or Mr. Crowthorne because he had taken
And the
against
perm,
his
yeah.
perm. Yeah, so I think Well, I quite like perms. So you're not... yes, you are, Lindsay. You are forgiven.
Could go either way.
Yeah, no, you're forgiven. You're forgiven.
Perfect crime, really. I mean, no one's hurt here, apart from Dad with his one leg having to constantly get up and leave his bottle of taboo on the side. I love the fact that the vicar was top of his list of suspects, followed by missionaries.
Vicar again?
It'll be the clerical lot. That'll be the reason why the doorbell keeps going off. And also, it's good news that we didn't actually play a doorbell sound, because that gets so many. We get so many emails. Not that. Don't play that. Many complaints.
Dogs go bonkers, don't they?
They do. So don't stop doing the doorbell sound effects. So I'm going to forgive.
The Confessions Podcast.
Father Simon says, Jez, I have a tale that, by the way, my guess is not forgiven. I have a tale that at this joyous time of year involves the birth of a child. Not just any child, but my firstborn, who was born on Christmas Day, 1997. This story starts almost 24 hours prior to the birth, and this is important as it's where everything all started to go downhill. It's Christmas Eve, it's 7 a.m, and still being childless, I'm fast asleep and have no reason to wake for a good few more hours. Remember those days? Such bliss. However, on this occasion, my slumber was rudely disturbed by my wife, Jenny, waking me with a casual, "My waters have broken, but it's okay, you can go back to sleep, as I don't have any contractions or anything." So I went back to sleep. Then Jez says...
What?
No, of course I didn't.
Who does that?
But it does set the tone.
Okay.
I wasn't quite doing the full Corporal Jones thing, but I bolted out of bed, started randomly trying to organise things. Obviously, it was all long since organised. Bags packed and ready, everything that she could possibly need in hospital, prepared and on standby. The morning was spent in a mixture of fake casualness, regular calls to the maternity ward, and trying to eat and stay hydrated to maintain energy, focus and readiness for the exertions to come. I think Jen might have done something as well. Eventually, the contractions came and reached the point where it was time to head in. On arrival, Jen was starting to get a little uncomfortable, but the midwife said she was a long way from being even close, so we could just relax. In her unfailing wisdom, Jen told me to go out and get something to eat, but not to be too long, and indeed to bring it and eat it in the ward. I went to a fast food place and, remembering her exhortations of not being too long, came back with it to eat and share with her. Oh dear. Jenny proceeded to give me a really hard time for A, being ages, I wasn't, and B, callously eating food in front of her when she couldn't even stomach weak tea, such was the pain from her contractions. "But you told me to!" I protested. "Well, you should have known!" She says.
Good, yeah.
My angel of a wife spat back. I took the food away, shoveled down what I could, and returned to an uneasy silence, feeling very hardly done by, I must say.
Yeah.
Time passed and conversations returned as pain and anticipation and excitement soon took over. Hands were held, little heartbeats listened to, comforting words given. Eventually it was time to move from the ward to the delivery rooms. There I had put on tapes of music on the in-room cassette player. All stuff I didn't really like, to be honest, but I did it because I loved her and she was doing something amazing. I love the fact we need to know.
He's so the hero in
He
this,
doesn't
isn't he?
like the music that he's programmed. Well,
Even though I don't like it.
big for you, eh?
Yeah.
The midwife checked her again, declared that this would be an easy birth and it would all be over within next to no time. After next to no time was replaced by soon, which was replaced by, well, this shouldn't take that long. It was becoming clear that the gas and air was patently not strong enough for the increasing pain. A quick discussion and out came the drugs, pethidine or something, I forget which one exactly. After quite a long time, the midwife was joined by another midwife who also declared, "Oh, this shouldn't be a problem, not long now." Meanwhile, the pain was getting more and more serious. Another examination was to happen, and this time a doctor was brought in. I was unceremoniously bumped out of the room to give them peace and quiet to examine the expectant mother. I think he'd been a bit annoying. This is Jez now, so I took a stroll around the delivery ward. Amongst the various cries and moans and gurgles, I heard the sound of singing. And I followed the tune and found some carol singers. Oh, how strange. They were in the main waiting area of the delivery ward, singing to a few who had gathered there. I asked them if they did requests, and could they come and sing to my wife, who was waiting to deliver. Apparently, of course they could. I gave them the room number.
What?
And shot off.
Shot off?
He shot off.
He's gone. He's let... Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
Back at the room, He's gone back to the room.
Oh, right. Oh, I see. Okay.
I waited. I held Jenny's hand. I looked at her pained and grey, sweating face, her clenched jaw, her tears. It was heartbreaking, really. If I could have taken the pain, I would have gladly done so, says Jez, slightly unbelievably. And then, perfectly, this happened. The angelic chorus started up just outside the door. The sweet sound of Away in the Manger. With a strange reverb.
Yeah.
Anyway, it lilted through the doorway, clear, strong and perfect on a Christmas Eve as a woman waits to produce the miracle of life. And this, Father Simon, is where I really do have to prostrate myself and ask humbly, meekly and feebly for forgiveness. You see, Jenny absolutely loathes and detests all Christmas carols. She really, really hates them with a vengeance. But she had woken me up way too early and made me go for food and then gave me a hard time and forced me to listen to some music in the delivery room that I really didn't like. At the sound of the singers, Jen opened her lungs and in the loudest voice I have ever heard her use, yelled something quite Anglo-Saxon that ended with the word off. The singing stopped as if the needle had been smashed from the record. But just in case they started again, she yelled exactly the same Anglo-Saxon phrase again.
Good.
They didn't start.
Oh, no.
And they did indeed go away. I was almost exploding with laughter, Father Simon, and got told very firmly that it's not bloomin' funny. Tidied that one up as well. So I quickly clammed up and tried very, very hard not to giggle and give myself away. Eventually, the pain and weight and worry of an overdue birth focused my attention, good, and I went back to being the dutiful and worried husband. Father Simon, the juggernauts of Yuletide justice, understanding festive listeners, I beg forgiveness not from Jen, who, until she hears this, still doesn't know that I set up the choir. Because she did have it coming, to be honest, for all the reasons I've listed in these pages. I also don't seek forgiveness from the choir, who, to be frank, shouldn't be singing in a delivery ward when there are women deranged with pain. But I am sorry for the poor midwife looking after Jen. She was new. We were one of her first since she went solo, and I'm not sure she did many more. Oh, and Jenny finally delivered our wonderful son, Jacob. And we went on to have 3 more amazing children. And although we're no longer together, we are the very best of friends, and hopefully still will be.
Bit of a coda there.
A little bit of a final line, which, to be honest,
we are no longer together.
Which, to be honest, I hadn't actually got to. Before.
Oh, really?
I thought, I've got the hang of this one.
Fell out quite a lot.
Yes.
Really? Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. I wonder if your jolly japes had something to do with it. Anyway, they're right at the end in the final phrase. Yeah. Anyway. Sister Bobby, what do you say?
Do you know what I was about to say? Jez, are you still married?
No.
Sorry. Of course you're not going to be forgiven, you big idiot. You said she had it coming. No, she didn't. She was in a delivery ward. You know she hated this. How was this ever going to help? And it's just funny from your point of view. It's also not fair on the carol singers. They were doing a great job, out there. I
like the way he turns on the carol singers. Yeah, they shouldn't have been there anyway.
They were singing in the corridor thinking they're doing a good thing, and they must have felt really deflated. So Jez, no. And what can I say to you? You are completely unforgiven. You're a mean-spirited person.
I suspect most people are going to be slightly unforgiving just to the general tone of Jez's cocky email.
Not me. I am definitely going to forgive. And here are the reasons. Number one, carol singers, that's a nice gesture. He happened to know that she didn't like carol singers, but she might have had a change of thought. She might have decided, you know what, now I do like carol. Don't they sound wonderful with all that reverb coming through? The reason I love it, though, is for his empty gesture of saying, do you know what, if I could have that pain instead of you, then I'd swap places in an instant.
Pants on fire.
That's not going to happen. So I love it for that alone. So I'm definitely going to forgive.
Simon Mayo's Confessions Podcast.
Thanks to Jez for his Christmas tale. I was born on Christmas Day. For those of you who don't listen, apparently there are people who don't listen to the show.
Unbelievable.
They just actually listen to this podcast. Which kind of makes me think, well, what's the point? We put all the effort in. All you have to do is to tune in.
What's the point?
You missed the reaction to the confessions from those who could be bothered to listen live.
Them.
And Jez's confession provoked this text. Colette in Devon, I've pulled over to say not forgiven and don't give him a drive time car sticker. Send it to his ex-wife who deserves it. Still to come, find out which confession prompted this jaw-dropping reaction from Matt and Bobby.
What?
Didn't see that coming.
So super. Neither did they.
Anyone did.
In fact, I think you might have known not just jaw dropping, but pen dropping. Listen.
That was me. Guilty, I think.
Genuinely astonished.
See that coming.
So super. Neither did they.
Anyone did.
Okay, so it's time to have a look at the parish notice board, adorned with some beautiful tinsel, which Claire Runacres has provided. What is this notice that has caught your attention, young Bobby? Bobby to read.
Sorry.
Page 3. You've only got one thing to do, Bobby, by the way. It's this bit
Just
here.
one line. No room at the end.
I'm going to call him Brian.
Tim emailed in to say,
Yes.
Hi Simon, love the show. I'm a long-time fan and once had the honour to be an expert on your nautical mile question on your Homework Sucks feature.
Oh, yeah.
As such, I was duly awarded a car sticker. Unfortunately, I had an accident in that car and lost the sticker. If you have some spare ones, could I be considered for a replacement? I was so proud of my sticker and was devastated to lose it, more so than the car.
Well, it's interesting that, yeah.
Can we send him a sticker?
I don't see any reason why not.
I'm going to overrule. I mean, you know.
Oh, he can have a sticker.
No, I don't think so.
He's
You
lost his
meanie.
car. He's not so bothered about the car.
I'm
He's-
sorry, but if we're going to make one rule for everyone gets a different
Okay,
dispensation.
We're going to have a vote. Bobby.
He
what
can
do you
have a
vote?
car
I say he
sticker.
can have a car stick. I have 3 votes. Matt, what have you saying?
I see. This is how it's going to work.
the way it's going.
Democracy.
No, it's called a managed democracy. It's where I decide what's going to
Oh,
happen
I see.
and impose
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think, Matt, you've got an entertaining
Yes,
email
I have.
there.
Pat from Gloucester emailed in to say, this happened to me, by the way, last week. I was driving home from work this evening on Friday the 8th, listening to your show, when you called out a message to Siri.
Hey, Siri.
Yeah, don't do that, because, Siri decided to reply to you explaining how to access podcasts. This meant I couldn't see or hear my navigation. Thanks for keeping me company on my 3-hour drive, snow problems, and for making me chuckle when Siri spoke back to you.
Hey, Siri, turn up the volume. Subscribe to the Confessions... well, obviously you have done because we're on the
Yes,
Confessions
well done.
podcast. So Tiff emailed to say, Father Simon, Brother Matt, Sister Bobby, I have a request, and it's not asking for an adult /18/XXX rated podcast, as I believe. That ain't going to happen.
No,
You're
it's not.
absolutely correct
It's
there.
not going to happen.
Due to the addictive nature of the Confessions podcast, I fear I may suffer some sort of withdrawal symptoms when you're all away over the Christmas period. Would you please consider putting up a podcast featuring 5 confessions of a vintage nature so we can manage to keep going during the confessional dry spell? Perhaps featuring some of Matt and Bobby's favourites. This is suspiciously
Wow,
like
this
it's been
is
written by
very
our
much like
production
written by-
team.
yeah.
I'm sure I won't be the only addict looking ahead and despairing of a week without hearing
Yes.
other calamitous tales.
If only that were going to happen, though.
P.S. Myself and my mother listen every day in the car at 5:40, and every day we have a bet as to whether Bobby will or won't forgive. Answer, she always will. The loser of the Bobby bet is tasked with making dinner. We both know that if it involves animals or, bizarrely, malicious forward planning, it will always be a big fat no. And rightly so. We love you, Sister Bobby.
Back at ya.
Malicious forward planning.
Yeah, that's what I look for.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Self-interest
just horrible,
and
isn't
malice.
it?
Yeah, that malicious forward
I
planning.
mean, in animals is one thing, but malicious forward planning, it
MFP.
really makes me rage.
yeah.
Anyway, thanks very much indeed for bringing that up, Tiff.
Funny you should mention
You
that.
should mention that. But that's exactly what we're going to do. There is a Best of the Confessions podcast which will be available in the week when we're not here. So there's no reason to suffer withdrawal symptoms. And let me tell you, it's an absolute corker. Trying to narrow it down to only the few that we were allowed. In fact, we leaked
Very
quite a
good.
few.
Yeah.
And we've got some bonus ones. So the answer is yes, there will be a Best of Confessions podcast available in the week that we're not here. And before we head back to the confessional booth, it's time for the non-compliant confessions.
excellent.
The more
Here
we
we
tell you what's not acceptable, the more you send it in. How does that happen? It's like dealing with children. I've told you once. The following tales not only don't get forgiveness, they also don't get a proper airing because they're so bad. That's B-A-D bad. Stories like Angela's were built for this section. I'm sure she didn't know any better, but your 3-year-old going to the toilet on a display model in a big DIY store is not the kind of Christmas log that we want to hear about. Thank you very much indeed. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Has it come to this?
Yes, it has, I think.
Please.
No, very good. Yeah.
Jenny, you knew you were putting booze in the cakes you took in for your last day in that job. And
Yes.
even if you did genuinely get the measures wrong. You got everyone at your office drunk. Jenny, or should I say that's Dr. Jenny, with her patients.
With her patient, she was giving her patients drunk cake. Unbelievable.
I mean, speechless.
Yeah. No, that doesn't get on.
They're all doctors?
They're all doctors.
They should
all
know
these
better.
Doctors.
If they were off duty, it would be fun.
What is the world coming to? A doctor that likes to drink? I've never heard of such a thing.
No.
Forgiveness also isn't forthcoming for Nick, who told the 13-year-old French exchange student staying at his parents' house that the correct phrase for complimenting Nick's mother's cooking was "yum yum lick your bum."
Yum yum, lick your bum.
The entente cordiale is perfectly healthy. And a confession from Peter about trying to politely tell the mother of his German fiancée that no, he didn't want any cheese, might work down the pub with the lads, but really isn't suitable here. Somehow Peter managed to say his fiancée's feet and... Hang on a second.
Yeah. Right.
Where are you getting inspiration
Also
from?
stank of cheese, and frankly, we're not talking about that kind of thing. I'm amazed. Utterly amazed.
Yeah.
You have something more family-friendly to share? If you could email confessions@bbc.co.uk, and even if it's not, you can send it
We're
in.
not doing that.
And this is the edited version.
I
Imagine.
feel like dastardly and Muttley.
And remember, due to a numbers mix-up in the marketing department, we have quite a few of our fabulous Drive Time car stickers going spare. So getting into the Christmas spirit, we'll generously send you a bumper sticker if, 1, you're the first to tweet the end of podcast code word, or you can get another member of your family to subscribe to the podcast. Obviously, photographic proof
Yes, we
will
do
need
need
to be
proof.
sent to
Yeah.
confessions@bbc.co.uk, or you send us some interesting correspondence that we might like a bit.
Oh, right. That's nice and vague.
Mentions here go to Sam Carruthers, who has subscribed to the podcast on her daughter's behalf, and to John Taylor, who has helped his 75-year-old dad subscribe. Just think, distract Dad quickly.
Yes.
Get his phone.
What's his
He
code?
he won't
Anyone
know.
know his code?
Push his. Wait till he falls asleep. Put his thumb on it.
Put the thumb on. There
Great.
you go. Brilliant.
Both have sent in photographic proof, so a Drive Time sticker will be on its way to you both. If you get the bus or the train or the bike or you walk when you listen to the podcast, we haven't left you out. If you'd like a Drive Time sticker, you can pop it on a window. This is like a serving suggestion. if it hadn't occurred to you, you can actually peel it off.
Imagine what can I do with this
I
sticker
know,
if I
I'm
don't
going
have
to
a
stick
car?
it on some random glass.
Yes.
Look for
also,
random glass.
Also works on Windows.
If you go past the dry cleaners, can I just stick this one
There
up
you
here?
go.
Thank you very much. Anyway, back to this week's confessions. Time to revisit Crazy Canuck's stomach-churning story, I'll Bake Care of You.
The Confessions Podcast.
Dear pandering purveyor of pastoral publium and his profoundly puerile panel of perspicacious
Okay.
pushers of pronounced punishment.
Yeah, well done.
Show it off.
Lot of peas.
No G. This confession is by proxy on behalf of my mother, who will remain mute and beyond redemption as I seek forgiveness for her from the Holy Trinity so that she may rest in peace. This confession goes back 65 years.
65?
65 years
Wow.
to when my mother attended an all-girls Roman Catholic school. This establishment was run by the nuns, with names like Sister Catherine, Sister Rose and Sister Mary Immaculate. Well, that's a cool name to have if you're a nun, don't you think? I'd like to be called that if I was a nun.
We can do that
yeah.
for
Which
you.
I'm not.
You
Which
get
I'm
to
not planning.
choose.
Hi, I am Sister Mary Immaculate.
Immaculate, I think you
One
find.
day nearing Christmas holidays, the home economics class of the day was for the 14 and 15-year-old students to bake a Christmas cake. Young teenage girls, a religious order, and Christmas cake. What could go wrong? Let's just leave that for a moment. Anyway, neither my father nor I nor my brother, let's just say this to make it absolutely clear. As a result of what happens here, neither my father nor I nor my brother can eat any Christmas cake ever.
Wow, this is great.
Now, it's a point of pride for my mother that at various times she said that she was a terrible cook. She wore her horrible cooking as a badge of selflessness, oft stating to her two sons, It's my gift to you and your future wives. The meals they cook for you will never become points of marital bitterness, as you will never utter the matrimonial, fight-inducing words, not a bad rendition of my favourite dish, dear, but not nearly as good as my mother's. Better luck next time. This is 65 years ago.
She is smart.
Anyway, back to my mother's cooking class at school, where she found that there was a problem with the ingredients the nuns had laid out. Sister, inquires my mother, we have all the ingredients we need except for brandy. There will be no... So this is a nun's voice now, because this might have been a Canadian nun or an Irish nun, I don't know. There will be no brandy for these recipes, says the nun, as it's being reserved for ecumenical services. This is a standard catch-all voice.
Isn't it, though, yeah?
Intoned Sister Mary Immaculate. Basically, the nuns' staff party was starting later that afternoon in the teacher's lounge, and that's what it was being kept for. My mother shrugged and continued, and after much mixing, spilling, and merry mess-making, the mixtures were dutifully spooned into buttered and floured pans and placed into the oven. 2 cakes per oven, as the students were working in pairs, each pair either to the left or right of the oven. To the right of the oven, in the other pairing, was my mother's bitter rival for my eventual father's affections, the blonde bombshell Della Rosa Stone. I have no doubt that there was much banter back and forth between the rivals as the class progressed. So it is no surprise that my mother would take any opportunity to score points, either overtly or covertly, against her bitter rival. On this occasion, a covert opportunity presented itself. The Christmas cake prepared by my mother and her partner wasn't quite as presentable as that produced by her rival, the evil blonde bombshell Della Rosa Stone. So, taking advantage of one of the many classroom distractions, my mother quickly and surreptitiously opened the oven door and switched the positions of the cakes. However, not surreptitiously enough, as it turned out, because from the front of the room, Sister Mary Immaculate loudly inquired, "Patricia, why are you doing what you are doing with your head in the oven?" "I'm just seeing how the Christmas cake is coming along, sister," says my mum. "Well, don't, Patricia, you'll ruin them." But, I hear you ask, where is the transgression in this? Who was wronged? Well, here comes the answer. If we rewind a little, the girl paired with my mother, sometime after placing their Christmas cake in the oven, observed quietly, so that only my mother could hear, "Oh no, all my warts have fallen off."
What?
Amid the mixing, the mashing, and the kneading of the ingredients, the girl's warts had all fallen into the batter and mixed indistinguishably from the currants and the raisins.
Didn't see that coming.
So neither did they.
Anyone did.
So superior presentation, it turns out, wasn't the reason for switching Christmas cakes. Rather, my mother merely saw this as an opportunity in her war against the blonde bombshell, the evil Della Rosa Stone. My probably unredeemable mother oft remarked when telling this story, more out of wonder than a guilty conscience, "I wonder if that blonde bombshell, the evil Della Rosa Stone, ever got stomach warts." If there is,
I wonder if she
there
did.
even is such a
we don't
thing.
think there is, but, you know.
Thus, Father Simon, I beg for my mother's forgiveness. However, I should clarify before the Holy Trinity renders its pronouncement that contrary to what I might have led you to believe at the beginning of the confession, my mother is actually still very much alive. It's just that she has no remorse over the Christmas cake chicanery, as it has proven to score additional points in her battle with the blonde bombshell, the evil Della Rosa Stone, to win my father's affections. And clearly she did. For that I am grateful, as I love my mother and cannot imagine what my name would have been if my mother had been named the evil Della Rosa Stone. Well, I think it's obvious. Anyway, I look forward to playing this podcast for my Luddite mother during the Christmas holidays. So pronounce away. So, anyway, we will pronounce. That is exactly what we're going to do. So thank you, Crazy Canuck. Canuck? Canuck.
I'm going to say Canuck.
Okay, let's say that then. I mean, I did warn you that obviously, you know, it was a slightly stomach churner, really, because you never know what's going in that mixture. In this case, a couple of warts. Anyway, what'd you say there, Sister Bobby?
I don't know, it's difficult, this one, because actually, generally, I don't think you should have done it. Because actually, Della Rosa Stone, well, we don't know what she actually did to her, did she? I mean,
A bitter rival, though. For,
well, was she a rival? Was she, it's one of those things that, did she kind of go for, were they already stepping out together and Della Rosa kind of stepped in?
Well, she's the evil Della
Well,
Rosa Stone.
Evil Della Rosa Stone.
You know.
See, I'm not clear on this. Having said that, I did love the story. I didn't see it coming at all. It was absolutely brilliant. But I think I'm going to have to be quite tough on you, Crazy Canuck or Canuck, and say, actually, you are unforgiven for switching cakes.
I wonder if Christmas cake mixture actually has special healing properties.
Maybe it does.
If you got warts.
Maybe it doesn't.
Anyway,
it's interesting because in cookery classes they do tell you to put hair nets on now these days. But I've never, and it would make perfect sense that if you've got stuff on your fingers that perhaps doesn't want to get into the mixture, then you should be wearing gloves as well. Maybe they do wear gloves now. But I love this story, and also I can't think of a better meal in which to put warts than Christmas pudding, because obviously, it's going. I mean, it's all going the same way anyway, isn't it? And actually, the body probably benefits in some way from having these things, and the circle of life, and all of those. So I am going to forgive because obviously it was the evil Della Rosetta Stone. So she had what was coming to her, frankly, a name like that.
If the PG certificate is still active, can I just say, I once made some peppermint creams when I was at school, for the school charity bake, right?
Okay.
And it was only later that I realised that some of my eczema had...
Lovely.
Oh.
But you'd spot that, wouldn't you? You'd spot that in cream, surely.
Slightly crunchy.
Goodness me.
Surprisingly crunchy.
This is the place where penitents seek our pardon for their sins. Simon Mayo's Confessions Podcast.
Dear purveyors of purgatory and verifiers of veniality. New
Very
and
good.
different, so positive and already looking good for you, Andrew. Some years ago, I was principal organist and director of music at a magnificent city church, and on the day in question had been in the building all afternoon practicing some Christmas music. Now, for reasons of cost, in such a large building, using the several kilowatts of lighting was discouraged except when necessary. But I well knew my way around the place anyway, so could manage quite adequately with a personal torch. Already we're nicely set up, I think. It had been broad daylight when I'd entered some hours earlier, and had gradually become darker and darker as I played away at the organ, using just the music desk and the pedalboard lights on the console itself, buried amongst the choir stalls and elaborate historic tombs of the great and the good in the chancel at the East End. The church effectively boasted two large, thundering pipe organs, one sited with the choir in the chancel, the other in a projecting gallery above the great west doors. Most significantly, for the purposes of this confession, these were configured so that it was possible to play the West End instrument from its own console on the gallery, or antiphonally from the console at the opposite the East End amongst the choir stalls. I hope that's clear.
Yes.
No.
Crystal.
Now, our church had recently received a major grant from a heritage organisation for repair. There aren't that many, but anyway, we're keeping it vague. For repair and restoration work. And it had been a condition of that grant that said historic building be kept open between 8 a.m. And 8 p.m. for visitors to enjoy. With the coming of shorter winter days, this had become a problem in that youths and children were coming in after school to indulge, I have to tell you, in petty acts of mischief and vandalism. And on the night in question, I had just finished practicing, and so switched the organ off at the East End console, meaning that at that moment I was in total darkness myself, concealed among the tombs and the choir stalls. And then I heard the unmistakable echoing creak of the huge West End door lumbering ajar, followed by a burst of youthful whispering, which was totally undiscernible in the vast acoustic, but which I assumed to be a scouting of whether the coast was clear or not. Clearly, they quickly decided that the coast was indeed clear, as I then recognised the familiar echo, that door creaking further open and the swell of considerable footfall, the crescendo of chatter and something clattering to the floor. There was also now the odd torch beam flashing around, and it had become obvious that there was quite a sizable gang of teenage youths about to do their worst in my church. There were bumps and thumps of things being thrown about, and it seemed increasingly apparent that they were egging each other on to ever more daring exploits. At this point, I stealthily crept in the pitch darkness back to the chancel organ console, where the blower control switches were located beneath the keybed. It was possible to switch both on without raising my head above the bench level, or risk being identified in any torch beams that were by now advancing up the nave. Fortunately, the gang of young vandals were making so much noise of their own, they did not observe the organ mechanisms waking up as I selected full organ using the appropriate toe piston. Full organ. So first I played... Then I tried... This is going to be loud. And then I carefully eased one end of the bench backwards to create sufficient space so I could then immediately and effectively prostrate myself across the full width of the pedal keyboard. This resulted in absolutely the most discordant, thunderous and unholy racket that the building had ever witnessed. I didn't have an effect of that. Much of it right above the heads of the most invisible gang still vandalising the West End. For those unfamiliar with the technicalities of classical organs, it is the pedal keyboard which controls the deep, thundering bass sounds which one feels rather than hears. For those who may be more familiar, this large instrument had batteries of honking great reeds capable of parting your hair. That's how loud this organ was. Check it out. Screams of abject terror erupted from, it seemed, all across the building at once, these being melded and amplified amid the dying reverberations of the organ to hideous effect. I switched all the blowers back off, returned the bench to its usual position, and quickly exited between the tombs into the adjacent lady chapel, in case anybody were to come out seeking and investigating the source of that ground-shaking, thundering voice of God. Amid the continuing panic, screams, terror and confusion, I had no cause to worry about any clattering that I made, and I then laid low in the vestry, I'll tell his reverence, for sufficient time to ensure that I was again alone in the building. It was only when I finally emerged that the degree of panic became obvious. Several bags and satchels had been abandoned, and there were various personal possessions left behind. Those responsible for the vandalism were duly identified from their abandoned belongings, and the church, let me tell you, never had any problems after that, what with it being haunted by the strange organist. However, I do now seek belated forgiveness, Father Simon, not from the vandals who ultimately got their comeuppance, but from those occupants of the tombs who had allegedly been awakened from their eternal slumber, from the Almighty whose thunder may be nothing like that heard in my building, and from the Church Council who may still, some 30 years later, be seeking to play down persistent rumours that their magnificent building is haunted by a thundering demon. I did observe that the area school's carol service just a couple of weeks later was somewhat less well attended than it had been in previous years, and I'm afraid I did not come clean at the time. This may have been because a couple of those held responsible for the vandalism tried it on with with a counterclaim that they'd been injured, albeit only superficially, on church premises. But they got nowhere, ha ha, says Andrew, the mystery and phantom organist from 30 years ago. Some people will have identified the church, I imagine. But you would have to say this is a fairly delightful comeuppance, really. If you're breaking into a church up to no good and the organist has all those pipes at his disposal, who wouldn't use the thundering tones of full organ? What do you say, Sister Bobby?
I love this.
Have you ever experienced full organ?
Anyway, what a beautifully written confession. I have to say, I love the language in this. I really do. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And honking great reeds will stay with me forever. Yeah. There you go.
If you've got the facility to use a honking great reed, use it. Particularly when it's well What you got?
I wish we had a camera in here
All the
sometimes.
bellows, firing it up.
I love it, and Andrew, you're absolutely right. Completely justified. And those souls that may be awakened, I think they'll forgive you as
Matt,
well.
next
It's
time
beautiful.
you want your hair parted,
Yes.
don't use a brush or a comb. Use a honking great church
Full organ,
There you
yes,
go.
we've gone full Dick Emery tonight. Well done, everyone. There was a point here where it seems like he was lying on top of the organ key. What a
was.
sight that would have been. I think obviously we're all going to forgive because of what the kids were in there to do. And also, do you know what? The church always love it when people say that they're haunted, because it means more people are coming in. They all love it. Bit more footfall. Everyone's winning out of this, apart from the kids who left their
Hooligans.
stuff. And yes, very much the bounders of this story. So I am definitely going to forgive.
Simon Mayo's Confessions podcast.
That was Andrew's confession, Songs in the Key of Strife, which prompted this reaction on the people's verdict. Jeff in Oxford. Simon, it's at times like this I ask myself,
Go on.
what would Reginald Dixon do? That concludes this week's batch of confessions. Maybe it's inspired you to send in yours. confessions@bbc.co.uk, a whole new season starting in January. Before we leave you, we have another treat from the Confessions Christmas Crypt. This week's has been requested by Bryony in Newark and Andy in Rohenbach in Austria, who sent in this email. Simon and the team. We enjoy listening to the Confessions podcast every Saturday whilst having breakfast. As we live, maybe not today though, as we live in Austria, we miss the chance to hear them live. With the coming festive season, I would like to suggest a Christmas-themed Confessions from the Crypt. It was the first Christmas the confessor was having the entire family down for Christmas, including the annoying mother-in-law. Also, she had borrowed the mother-in-law's best china, and deciding the plates needed warming before serving dinner. That's all I can say without spoiling it. So we're going to bring you now, for your Christmas delectation, When Love and Plates Collide.
The Confessions podcast.
Dearest Collective, my confession takes me back 20 years. I was newly married, young, hopeful, and fearless. My husband and I had recently moved into our first home. It was going to be our first Christmas together, and I was determined to impress my new parents-in-law, who had so graciously welcomed me into their family like the daughter they had never had. My mother-in-law was, let's say, a strong character, the kind of lady who knew what she wanted from life and possibly also what she wanted from a daughter-in-law. But I wasn't daunted by this and looked forward to the challenge of being the perfect wife and the perfect daughter-in-law. We decided we would host the family Christmas Day at our house and invite my parents-in-law, my new husband's sisters and brothers, and a selection of cousins, aunts and uncles. In total, there were to be 15 of us. But I wasn't fazed. This would be the ideal opportunity to show everyone, especially my mother-in-law, what I was made of and what a good choice my husband had made. The key to success was in the planning, and this is clearly all going to go perfectly well, isn't
obviously.
it? Serenely. Even though we weren't very experienced at catering for more than two, and our house was a little on the small side, I felt very confident that I could provide the perfect Christmas day and earn myself some respect and acceptance into the family. Weeks before the big day, I had the schedule for the perfect day written, rehearsed, and meticulously planned. Now, my mother-in-law did like things just so, and I'd been given fair warning of this in the years prior to our marriage. The table had to be set perfectly with all the correct cutlery, napkins, sauces, and so on. And plates most definitely had to be warmed. Knowing that we would not be able to provide matching place settings, my mother-in-law had very generously offered to lend us a 15-piece dinner service just for the day. This dinner service was very special. It was displayed proudly on the dresser in their home. I know. Yeah. My Mother Superior's head in hands already. Handed down over the generations, this set was very precious and was used only at Christmas and Easter. How kind it was for her to lend this to us, and how lovely it would be to serve my first family Christmas dinner on this special dinner service. So the big day arrived. The table had to be laid the previous day, leaving me in the morning to put my plan into action and serve a wonderful Christmas meal and impress the family. As you can imagine, every appliance, utensil and surface was employed for this huge feast. And since the oven was going to be completely full of turkey, roast potatoes and parsnips, I had come up with a clever plan to warm the plates for the meal, which I think, I have to say, everyone else is going to say is stupid. A plan that would ensure warmed plates, but that would not take up any precious space in my overwhelmed oven. I was on schedule and all was going to plan. 20 minutes before the meal was to be served, I put on the tumble dryer.
Oh, no.
I had calculated that if I ran the machine for 20 minutes, this would heat the drum sufficiently, so that when I then put the crockery inside, the heat from the drum would be enough to heat them through to perfection. What a plan! With the 20 minutes up and the drum of the tumble dryer hot, I carefully placed the precious dinner service inside. They fit quite comfortably, and at this point I was wondering why this technique was not employed more often. When everything was in the tumble dryer, I carefully stepped back and closed the door.
No.
I had planned for everything that day, but not what happened next. Did you know that on some models of tumble dryer, when the door closes, the drum automatically begins to turn? I didn't. It only needed one rotation for me to grab the door, open it, and stop the drum rotating. Sadly, it only needed one rotation to smash all 15 dinner plates,
Wow.
2 tureens, and a large meat platter. I realise now that the naivety of my plans that day, and yes, I think on reflection it was all a little too ambitious. It's a tumble dryer! We ate dinner that day on a variety of plates, and my mother-in-law was given my nephew's Bob the Builder set with matching beaker and dessert bowl.
Superb.
I left it to my husband to explain that in the rush to get everything ready, unfortunately the loaned dinner service had been left at work by my husband. Some 20 years later, I still shudder every time I close the tumble dryer door and think of that fateful day. I have never confessed my mishap to anyone before now, and I feel I need to ask forgiveness, not from my parents-in-law, who frankly should have lent me their hostess trolley as well, but I ask forgiveness from my husband, as he had to manage my hysteria all day, to lie to his parents, spend all of his Christmas present money on a replacement dinner service, and pick small shards of crockery out of his clothing for the next 6 months. We've hosted Christmas many times since and had some fun family times, but when we do, and the dinner is served, the plates are always cold. Well, I would suggest to you there's a daft old plan, but it's an immaculately written confession, and Joe, we appreciate that. Our first Christmas tale of a disastrous Christmas dinner, but clearly the fault was even thinking that the tumble dryer was going to stay stationary. Sister Rebecca.
What an amazing confession that was. But, you know, you can sort of see her logic, can't you? In a way. I mean, it was quite a good idea.
As long as it stays
until went
stationary,
wrong.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, she could have just used the hot water method. I find that's quite effective,
True.
don't you? I don't know. I mean, I think the guilt that Jo must have felt throughout this time, you know, for her husband having to pay for the replacement, that's terrible. I think she's already paid her penance, actually, and obviously she didn't intend to break the dinner service. So, Jo, you are forgiven.
I think everybody heard in their heads the noise of that one single
smashing.
revolution of the drum as they all just collapsed against each other. Mother Superior.
Sister Rebecca, what is the hot water solution? What is that?
Well, you just run the plates under hot water to warm them up.
Well, then they'll be wet.
Well, you can
Then you
dry
dry
them.
them.
Oh, okay, fine.
That's the second stage.
Oh, sorry.
Of
No,
the
I mean,
hot water
again,
method.
I think it's a logical idea, isn't it? Yeah, it's a very good idea. It didn't work. But do you know this thing of mother-in-laws? I never understand how horrible some mother-in-laws can be, or how terrifying they can be to some daughter-in-laws. I mean, obviously the mother-in-law, clearly she had no sense of humour about what had happened. I mean, your daughter-in-law puts all the plates in the tumble dryer and they break. Horrible, but you know, you've got to laugh about it. I bet they've never
We
laughed
don't
about
actually know what the mother-in-law would have said. 'Cause
well, it doesn't sound to me as if in subsequent Christmases they've looked back and laughed particularly. So I just think, you know, don't be scared of your mother-in-law, for goodness sake. I mean, I've got children with girlfriends, one child, and you try and be nice to them. Just be nice to them, that's all. Anyway, you're forgiven.
Thank you very much. Imagine having the Mother Superior as your mother. It should be absolutely the perfect mother-in-law.
I'm a very, very nice mother-in-law.
And here comes the words of Brother Matthew.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the lesson's been learnt here, and I think it is a real pity that she's only confessing now, because I think this would be a great story to tell every Christmas over the table. And also, I think the idea of warming plates is overrated, frankly. I've never understood it. I don't need my plate to be warm.
I don't really
frankly,
either.
the food's not on it long enough for it to get cold anyway, so I wouldn't have bothered but putting them in the tumble dryer, what an excellent idea. Just, yes, be very careful about closing the door afterwards.
I like the idea of the mother-in-law being given Bob the Builder matching
Serves her right.
beaker and dessert
Serves her
bowl.
right. And it's a good plate, that, the Bob the Builder one, as well, probably the biggest one they've got.
Simon Mayo's Confessions podcast.
That was When Love and Plates Collide, starring Rebecca Pike,
Yes,
Sally Traffic,
correct.
and Matt on sport.
On base.
It's
Thanks.
it's a fairly astonishing thing to think of, really.
Yes, I can think of somewhere warm to put my plates.
I know. Let's put him on that particular programme. Sister Bobby, you forgave 2 this week, so your 90.5 forgives, 87.5 not forgives. Matt, you forgave everyone again.
Everyone again, because everyone needs forgiveness, don't we, at this time of year, surely?
That takes you to 123.5 against 53.5 not forgives.
Yes.
You are a snowflake.
I am very much in favour of my fellow man.
If
and
you
woman.
made it to the end of the last podcast, I asked you to tweet, is that cat wearing a beret? Thanks to Gordon, who was the first to tweet the code word. Car sticker is winging its way to you now. John, Catherine, Phil, Eddie, Alison, Kat, Tom and loads of others did just that, but they're losers. So because they weren't
Obviously,
first.
no.
No. Is that wrong? This week's code phrase is, turn it to full organ. I repeat, turn it to full organ. Thanks very much. Anyway, remember to subscribe and don't forget you can hear our whole radio show every weekday from 5 on BBC Radio 2. Shall we find another Radio 2 jingle?
Let's
conclude the...
sign off with that, I think,
Okay, that's very good. If I can find one.
if you could.
Shall we do ID Classical?
Why not?
Thank you so much for downloading this latest Confessions podcast from your friends at Radio 2. We'll be back with another one next week. Goodbye from Bobby.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from Matthew.
Farewell.
So long, dear friends. Until next time.